Sometimes people just assume they can do whatever they want, even when it's clearly not their place. I woke up one morning, opened my phone, and saw a text from a neighbor saying, "Hey, I think you've got some new cars in your garage." Now that was strange, because I don't let anyone park in my garage. I grabbed my coffee, walked outside, and the second I opened that garage door, my jaw almost hit the ground. Two massive pickup trucks were parked inside. Not small ones, these were huge heavy-duty work trucks. And here's the thing. I didn't recognize them at all. At first, I honestly thought maybe the sheriff's department had swapped out some of their vehicles. Because, you see, I don't just use that garage for my own stuff. I lease it to the county sheriff's office. It's part of a contract we've had for years. They use it for storing some of their gear and keeping certain vehicles safe when they're not on duty. No one else has the right to park in there. No one. But when I stepped closer, I realized these trucks had no sheriff markings. No decals. No government plates. Nothing. They were completely private vehicles. And that's when it hit me. Someone had decided that my garage was their free parking lot. I stood there for a moment just trying to figure it out. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe a delivery guy needed to unload something. Maybe they were lost. But when I peeked through the driver's side window, I saw tools, personal items, and even a half-empty fast food bag on the seat. This wasn't an accident. So, I walked over to the nearest neighbor's house to ask if they knew anything. And sure enough, she knew exactly who the trucks belonged to. It wasn't even her house, it was her friend. Her friend had apparently decided she needed a safe place to park for a few days. Instead of asking me, or anyone, she just backed them right into my garage like she owned the place. Now you've got to understand, I don't like starting drama. I'm the type of person who believes in talking things out first. So I went to her door, knocked, and when she answered, I politely said, "Hey, did you happen to park two trucks in my garage?" She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Yeah, just for a little while. I needed somewhere to put them." No apology. No concern. Just that casual, almost annoyed tone, like I was inconveniencing her by even asking. I explained that the garage was leased to the sheriff's department and she couldn't park there. Her response? A shrug and, "They won't care. It's not a big deal." That's when I realized we weren't dealing with an innocent mistake here. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she didn't think I'd do anything about it. Because in her mind, it was just temporary. And if there's one thing I've learned, temporary often turns into permanent when you let people cross boundaries. I went back home, sat down, and thought about it. Part of me wanted to just call the sheriff's office right then and there. After all, it was their lease, their space, their right to use it without interference. But another part of me wanted to handle it myself, because this wasn't just about the sheriff's contract. This was about respect. When you lease something to someone, it's legally theirs to use. And when someone else barges in, it's not just rude, it's trespassing. The more I thought about it, the more I realized she was actually putting herself in a risky situation. What if the sheriff's team came to get their vehicle and found her trucks blocking the space? What if they had an emergency and needed to move quickly? This wasn't just an inconvenience, it could have real consequences. Still, I wanted to give her a chance to do the right thing. So I sent her a text later that afternoon. "Hey, I really need those trucks moved today. That garage isn't available, it's under contract. Can you please take care of it?" Hours went by. No reply. The trucks stayed right where they were. And that's when I started thinking, maybe it was time for her to find out exactly who she was messing with. Because while she might think she just picked a random garage in the neighborhood, she had actually picked the one garage that had the county sheriff's name on the lease. And that, my friends, was about to make this whole thing a lot more interesting. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I didn't even need an alarm. I had that restless feeling, the kind you get when you know something is out of place and you can't relax until it's fixed. Before even making coffee, I walked straight to the garage. And sure enough, those two giant trucks were still sitting there like they owned the place. I stood there for a moment, staring at them. It's funny, when something like this happens, you start thinking about all the little ways people test boundaries. One day it's just for a few hours. The next day it's just until the weekend. Before you know it, your space isn't yours anymore. So I decided I wasn't going to let another day go by without taking action. The first thing I did was check my lease agreement with the county sheriff's office. And there it was, in black and white. No unauthorized vehicles. No personal use. Full access belongs to the sheriff's department 24/7. I smiled a little because that meant I had every legal right to have those trucks removed immediately. But I still wanted to give her one more chance. I pulled out my phone and called her. No answer. I left a voicemail, calm but firm. "I need those trucks out today. This isn't my personal space, it's leased to the county sheriff. If they show up, they won't be asking politely. Please move them. Hours passed. Nothing. No text, no call, no sound of an engine starting in my garage. By noon I'd had enough. I decided to make a quick call to my contact at the sheriff's office. I wasn't calling to stir up trouble. I was calling because I knew they had the authority to handle this in a way that would make her take it seriously. When I explained the situation, my contact chuckled and said, "Well, I hope she's ready for a surprise." I could hear the amusement in his voice, but I could also tell he meant business. He told me they'd send a deputy over to check on their leased property. About 40 minutes later, a black and white patrol vehicle rolled quietly up to my driveway. The deputy stepped out, clipboard in hand, sunglasses on, with that calm, controlled presence they all seem to have. We exchanged a quick greeting and I led him to the garage. The moment he saw the trucks, he shook his head slowly. "These don't belong here," he said flatly. I explained how I'd tried to handle it politely and how she'd ignored me. He made a note on his clipboard, then asked, "Do you want us to handle it from here?" I hesitated for about 2 seconds, then nodded. Because by now, I'd realized something. She wasn't just ignoring me, she was betting that I wouldn't do anything. And the best way to end that bet was to let the sheriff's office remind her exactly whose name was on the lease. The deputy radioed in a towing request. And here's where it started to get interesting. Within 15 minutes, a heavy-duty tow truck came rumbling down the street. Not one of those little roadside assistance trucks. This was a serious rig, the kind used for hauling commercial vehicles. The kind that made it very clear. This wasn't a friendly favor, this was official business. The driver got out, nodded at the deputy, and started hooking up the first truck. It was at that exact moment, she came running out of her house. Hair messy, phone in hand, voice raised. "What are you doing?" "That's my truck." The deputy didn't even flinch. "Ma'am, these vehicles are parked in a secured, leased property belonging to the county sheriff's office. You have no authorization to be here." She started to protest, something about, "I didn't know, and I was just using it for a couple of days." But the deputy calmly interrupted. "You were informed by the leaseholder. You were given time to remove them. You chose not to. Now they're being removed at your expense." Her voice dropped, and for a second I thought she might try to apologize. But instead she crossed her arms and said, "Fine. I'll move them myself." The deputy shook his head. "Not anymore. This is now a law enforcement matter. They're going to impound." She tried to argue, but the tow driver kept working, securing the first truck. The sound of the ratchet straps clicking tight filled the air, each snap making it clear this was final. Her expression shifted from anger, to disbelief, to that sinking realization that this was actually happening. As the first truck was lifted and rolled toward the street, she muttered something under her breath and stormed back inside. The deputy stayed calm, just watching as the tow driver moved on to the second truck. Within minutes, both were gone, heading down the road toward the impound lot. And I stood there watching the empty garage appear again. It felt like a small victory, but also like the beginning of something bigger. Because now, the situation had shifted completely. And I had a feeling this wasn't the last I was going to hear from her. The next day I thought maybe the whole thing was over. The garage was empty again. No trucks. No strangers coming and going. It felt peaceful. But peace didn't last long. Around mid-morning I heard loud banging at my front door. Not knocking. Banging. Like someone was ready to break the door down if I didn't answer fast enough. I opened it and there she was. Same woman, hair brushed this time, but with that look in her eyes like she was ready to explode. Before I could even say, "Hello," she was already in full attack mode. "You had my trucks towed?" she snapped. Her voice was loud enough for half the street to hear. "You couldn't just come talk to me like a normal person?" I raised an eyebrow. "I did talk to you. Twice. Once in person, once in a message. You ignored me." She crossed her arms and leaned forward like she was trying to intimidate me. "You know how much it costs to get 2 trucks out of impound?" I stayed quiet. She answered her own question anyway. "Thousands. And you're going to pay for it." Now that's the part where I actually laughed. Not a mean laugh. Just the kind of laugh you give when someone says something so ridiculous you almost wonder if they're joking. "You're serious?" I asked. She glared at me. "Dead serious." I shook my head slowly. "Listen, that garage is under contract with the county sheriff. You parked there without permission. The sheriff's department handled the removal. This isn't on me." Her face turned red. "Don't play games with me. I know you could have stopped it." She jabbed her finger in my direction like I had personally stolen her trucks and sold them for parts. Then she tried a different angle. I have rights too, you know. You can't just. I cut her off. You don't have rights to a property you don't lease. And in case you forgot, you broke into my locked garage to park there. That's when she tried to spin the story. I didn't break in. The door wasn't locked. It was open. I tilted my head. Which makes it better. How? She went quiet for a moment, then took a deep breath. Look, I just needed somewhere to put them for a few days. I didn't think it would be a big deal. That was the closest thing to an apology I'd heard from her, and even that felt like it was dripping with attitude. I could have left it there. I could have just told her to leave and be done with it. But she'd crossed a line, and now she was demanding money like I was the one who had wronged her. That wasn't going to happen. I reached for my phone and pulled up the sheriff's contact again. I think we should call the deputy who was here yesterday, I said. Her eyes widened slightly. Why would you do that? So he can explain it to you directly. Since apparently you didn't believe me yesterday. Her posture shifted instantly. The bravado faded, replaced by a flash of nervousness. You don't have to do that, she said quickly. But I had already dialed. The deputy picked up on the second ring. I explained, loud enough for her to hear, that the vehicle owner was at my door, demanding I pay her impound fees. He didn't hesitate. Tell her if she continues to harass you, we'll come out and take a statement. This is bordering on criminal trespass and harassment now. I thanked him, hung up, and turned back to her. Did you catch that? I asked. She clenched her jaw, then muttered, this isn't over. And with that, she turned and stormed off my porch, slamming her car door so hard I thought the window might shatter. The rest of the day I kept expecting her to show up again. But instead something else happened. Around dinner time a different neighbor stopped by. He leaned on my fence and said, you know, she's been going around the neighborhood telling everyone you're some kind of bully. Says you used the sheriff's office to punish her. I couldn't help but laugh again. She left out the part where she parked in a sheriff-leased garage without permission? The neighbor grinned. Yeah, funny how she forgot that detail. Still, it was clear she wasn't done stirring the pot. Because if she couldn't get her money back from me, she was going to try to win sympathy from everyone else. And in a small neighborhood, gossip travels fast. Too fast. That's when I realized, this wasn't going to stay a simple parking dispute. She was turning it into a full-blown neighborhood drama. And the worst part? The sheriff's department was now keeping a much closer eye on the property, which meant the next move she made could land her in way deeper trouble than just impound fees. The next couple of days felt strange. Every time I stepped outside I could feel eyes on me. Not just curious glances, the kind of looks people give when they've already heard a version of a story, and they've decided where they stand. It didn't take long to figure out why. She had been busy. And by busy, I mean she'd been going door to door, telling anyone who would listen that I was some kind of tyrant who used the sheriff's office to get back at her over a harmless parking situation. Harmless, that was her favorite word. One afternoon, I walked down the street to get my mail, and two neighbors I'd known for years barely gave me a nod. Another one, who used to wave every time he saw me, turned his head like he didn't even see me. I couldn't help but laugh under my breath. She was really trying to paint herself as the victim here. The truth is, in a neighborhood like ours, stories spread faster than wildfire. But they don't spread evenly. Some people will take one side, others will take the opposite, and a few will just sit back with popcorn enjoying the show. And I could tell a few of them were loving this little drama. That evening, I was in my garage, the now empty, perfectly quiet garage, when I saw a familiar black and white vehicle roll by slowly. The sheriff's deputy who had helped me before gave me a small nod as he passed. It wasn't random. They were keeping an eye on things. Later that night I got a text from him. Just a heads up. We've had a couple of calls about you already. All unfounded, but she's trying to stir things up. We're documenting everything. Calls. That caught me off guard. Apparently she had decided gossip alone wasn't enough. She was now trying to create some kind of official trouble for me, hoping maybe the sheriff's office would see me as a problem instead of her. The irony was almost too much. But here's the thing, I wasn't worried. Because every single thing that had happened so far was in my favor. There were texts, voicemails, and even the deputy's own report. If anything, her calls were just making her look worse. The next morning I was sitting on my porch when I saw her again. She was across the street, talking to two neighbors, waving her hands around as if she was giving a dramatic performance. Every now and then she'd glance over at me, then keep talking. I didn't move. I just sipped my coffee and let her finish her little show. A few hours later, another neighbor stopped by. He's the kind of guy who doesn't buy into gossip without checking the facts. Hey, he said, lowering his voice. She's saying you set her up. That you knew she needed a place to park and you trapped her so you could get her towed. I actually laughed out loud. Set her up? How exactly does someone set up another person to illegally park in their garage without permission? He smirked. Yeah, I told her that didn't make sense. But she's not letting it go. That's when it hit me, she wasn't just trying to save face anymore. She was trying to flip the entire story on its head so she could claim she was wronged. And in her mind, if she could get enough people to believe it, maybe she could pressure me into paying her towing and impound fees just to shut her up. But I wasn't going to bite. I dealt with people like her before, people who think volume equals truth and persistence equals victory. I knew her type. The more you push back, the louder they get. The real trick is letting them run their mouths long enough to dig their own hole. By the weekend, things got even more interesting. I was walking back from the corner store when I noticed a bright yellow tow truck parked a few houses down, at her place. It wasn't the same one that had taken her trucks before, but it was definitely a tow service. And sure enough, there was one of her trucks, back from the impound, parked right in her driveway. But the other? Nowhere to be seen. I didn't need to ask. The impound probably still had it. And that meant her bill was still growing every single day it sat there. As I walked past, she came out onto her porch. Our eyes met for just a second and she gave me that look, the one that says, I'm not done with you. But this time there was something else in her eyes too. Something I hadn't seen before. Worry. Because she knew, the sheriff's department was still watching. And the next wrong move she made wouldn't just end with a tow truck. 2 days later, the neighborhood felt quieter, but it was the kind of quiet that doesn't really mean peace. It was that tense kind of quiet, like everyone's just waiting for the next thing to happen. And I had a feeling she was planning her next thing. That feeling was confirmed when mid-afternoon, I noticed a delivery van stop in front of my house. The driver got out, knocked on my door, and handed me a thin envelope. It wasn't a package. It wasn't junk mail. It was a letter. I opened it right there on the porch. Inside was a printed sheet in all caps, claiming that I owed her compensation for the wrongful towing of her vehicles. It even had a breakdown of the costs she expected me to cover: towing fees, impound storage, and emotional distress. The number at the bottom? Over $6,000. I actually smiled as I read it because it was so far beyond reality it almost felt like a prank. But it wasn't a prank. It was her attempt to scare me into writing a check. A couple of hours later, my phone buzzed. It was my contact at the sheriff's department again. She's been calling here too, he said. Trying to claim you acted illegally. We've documented it all. She's not getting anywhere with us. I told him about the letter. He didn't even hesitate. Keep it. Don't respond. She escalates, let us know. And if she shows up again, call us right away. That night, as I was taking out the trash, I noticed something odd. My garage door, the same one she had used before, was slightly open. Not all the way, but just enough for someone to slip inside. That's when I knew for sure, she wasn't done. I pulled the door fully open and stepped inside. Nothing was missing, nothing was damaged, but there were fresh tire marks on the concrete floor. Someone had been in here again. I checked the small security camera I'd installed above the door after the first incident. Sure enough, there she was on video earlier that afternoon, walking right in as if she had the right. And parked inside for less than 20 minutes, was another one of her vehicles. She tried it again. This time, I didn't bother texting or knocking on her door. I sent the video straight to my contact at the sheriff's office. Within an hour, a marked patrol car rolled up in front of her place. 2 deputies got out and knocked on her door. I stayed inside watching from my front window. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see her body language, the hand waving, the head shaking, the arms crossing. Every few seconds, one of the deputies would point toward my garage, then toward the street. It was clear they weren't buying whatever excuse she was trying to sell. After about 10 minutes, she disappeared inside her house, only to come back out with some paperwork. One deputy glanced at it, shook his head, and handed it back to her. The conversation ended quickly after that, and she stood there on her porch, arms folded, watching them leave. That night, I got a text from the same deputy who'd been here before. She's officially been warned. Next time she steps foot in that garage without permission, she's getting charged with criminal trespass. It was the first time I felt like the tide was turning. Up until now, she'd been pushing the limits, testing to see how far she could go. But now, there was a clear line drawn, and she knew exactly what would happen if she crossed it again. The next morning, as I was leaving for work, I noticed her standing at the end of her driveway, talking to yet another neighbor. But this time when she saw me, she didn't yell. She didn't even glare. She just looked at me for a long second, then turned away. For the rest of the day the street felt different. Quieter. Still tense, but quieter. I didn't know if she was done, or if she was just planning something bigger. But I did know one thing: if she tried to make another move, she wouldn't just be dealing with me this time. She'd be dealing with the law, and the law already had her number. For a couple of days, it almost felt like she had finally given up. No trucks. No letters. No strange visits to my garage. It was so calm I almost convinced myself the whole thing was over. But people like her, they don't just quit. They wait. They stew. And then they try something bigger, thinking it'll be the move that finally gets them what they want. It was a Friday evening when the first sign showed up. I was pulling into my driveway when I noticed a small crowd in front of my place. 3 neighbors plus her, all standing around talking in that low, gossipy tone. When they saw me, she stepped forward like she'd been waiting all day for this moment. "We need to talk," she said, her voice dripping with false calm. I didn't answer. She kept going. "I've spoken to some people. You can't keep using the sheriff's office to intimidate me. It's harassment." I almost laughed, but she was dead serious. She was trying to flip the story yet again, this time framing herself as the victim of official intimidation. It was obvious what she was doing, setting the stage so she could run to the county, claim I was abusing a law enforcement connection, and maybe even try to get the lease canceled. "Anything else?" I asked. Her eyes narrowed. "Oh, there's more. I've filed a complaint." She actually smiled when she said it, like she thought she had me cornered. That night, I decided not to wait for the storm to hit. I called my contact at the sheriff's department and told him exactly what she had just said. There was a pause, then a short laugh on the other end of the line. "She really doesn't know when to stop, does she? Don't worry, we've got something in motion already." I didn't ask what he meant. I figured I'd find out soon enough. Sure enough, the next morning I was sipping my coffee when 2 sheriff's vehicles pulled up in front of her house. Not 1, 2. A deputy got out of each. This wasn't a friendly visit. I stayed on my porch, quiet, as they walked up to her door and knocked firmly. She answered quickly, probably thinking this was about her complaint against me. Her confident smile lasted maybe 3 seconds. Then I saw her face change. The deputies weren't here to take her side. I couldn't hear every word, but I caught pieces. Unauthorized entry. Violation of warning. Possible charges. Her arms started waving wildly. She kept pointing in my direction, but the deputies didn't even look over. They were focused on her. A few minutes later, one of them pulled out a folded piece of paper and handed it to her. She read it and her shoulders dropped. I didn't need to guess, it was official. A written trespass order. In black and white. She was now legally barred from stepping foot in my garage or anywhere on my property, period. One of the deputies pointed toward her driveway, probably explaining what would happen if she ignored it. She tried one last time to argue, but it didn't matter. The conversation was over. The law had spoken. As they left her porch, one deputy came over to me. He kept it short. "She's been served. If she comes near your property again, call us immediately. We'll take it from there." Then he gave me a look that said, "We're done playing games with her." That was the first time in weeks I felt a real sense of relief. Not just because of the paper, but because it was no longer just me versus her. Now there was an official record, a legal boundary, and a law enforcement team who had her on their radar. Later that day, I saw her sitting on her porch alone. No neighbors around. No little crowd hanging on her words. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked cornered. But I knew her type. Cornered doesn't always mean done. Sometimes it just means she's about to make one last desperate move. I figured the trespass order would finally put an end to everything. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that some people just can't stand losing. And she wasn't built to take a loss quietly. For a few days things stayed calm. Too calm. No shouting from her porch, no pointed stares, no accidental appearances near my driveway. But every time I saw her, she had that tight smile, the kind people wear when they're pretending they've moved on, but they're really planning something. The plan revealed itself on a Wednesday afternoon. I had just pulled into my driveway when I saw a strange pickup parked halfway across my front lawn. At first, I thought maybe it was a delivery gone wrong. But then I noticed the bed of the truck was loaded, and I mean loaded, with old junk. Broken furniture. Rusty metal. Torn boxes spilling over the side. I didn't have to think twice to know where it came from. She decided that if she couldn't park in my garage, she'd turn my property into her personal dumping ground. I got out of my car, pulled out my phone, and started recording. No yelling, no drama. Just a slow pan across the truck, the mess, and the fresh tire tracks across my grass. I walked toward her driveway and there she was, standing with her arms crossed like she was proud of herself. "What is this?" I asked flatly. She smirked. "Just cleaning out my place. Thought you could use some extra stuff." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I simply pulled up the sheriff's contact on my phone and hit call. I made sure she could hear every word. "Yeah, it's me again. You might want to send someone out. We've got a trespass violation and an illegal dump." Her smile faded instantly. "You're really calling them over this?" she said, trying to sound incredulous. I didn't even look at her. They told me to call. And now I'm calling. Within 15 minutes, a patrol car pulled up. It was the same deputy as before. The moment he stepped out, I could see the change in his expression. He wasn't amused anymore. This was official now. She tried to meet him halfway, launching into some long explanation about how she thought it was okay, since it was just temporary and she was going to come back for it later. He stopped her mid-sentence. "Ma'am, you've already been served with a trespass order. This is a direct violation. On top of that, you've illegally dumped property on someone else's land. That's 2 charges." Her face went pale. "You can't charge me for this. It's just some junk." The deputy shook his head. "You're not hearing me. This is trespassing and illegal dumping. Both are citable offenses, and in this case, given the history, we can take you into custody right now." That got her attention. Her eyes darted between me and the deputy. I stayed quiet. This wasn't my moment, it was hers. She tried again. "Fine, I'll move it. I'll move it right now." But it was too late. The deputy pulled out his radio and spoke a few short words I couldn't quite make out. A few minutes later, another patrol car arrived. This time they didn't waste time arguing. They told her to turn around and place her hands behind her back. Her voice went up an octave. "Are you kidding me? For junk?" The deputy's reply was calm, almost bored. "For violating a legal order. And yes, for illegal dumping. You knew better." As they led her toward the patrol car, she glanced over her shoulder at me. It wasn't anger in her eyes this time. It was disbelief. Like she truly thought she was untouchable until this exact moment. I stood there watching as they put her in the back seat. The truck she'd left on my lawn was still there, the mess spilling out into my yard. One deputy came over and asked if I wanted it towed. I nodded. Within half an hour, a tow truck had hauled it away, straight to impound, the same place her other vehicles had gone before. As the patrol cars pulled away with her inside, the street was silent. No gawking neighbors, no whispered conversations. Just the sound of tires fading into the distance. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace settling over the block. But I also knew, people like her don't stay quiet forever. The difference now was simple. The next time she even thought about making a move, she wouldn't just be picking a fight with me. She'd be picking one with the law that had already proven it was ready to act. The day after they took her away, the neighborhood felt different. Quieter. Not the tense, awkward quiet we'd had for weeks. This was the kind of quiet you notice when a storm finally passes. Still, I could sense the curiosity buzzing just under the surface. By mid-morning, people were starting to drift out of their houses. Some were clearly checking the mail for the 3rd time that day, others were walking dogs they didn't normally walk until evening. They weren't out here for exercise. They wanted an update. I didn't go out of my way to give them one. I wasn't going to stand on my porch like a town crier announcing the latest chapter in the saga. But if someone asked me directly, I told them the truth. She violated a trespass order and illegally dumped junk on my property. The sheriff handled it. That's all there is to it. Some nodded in quiet approval. A couple looked genuinely surprised, like they'd been buying into her version of events and now realized the picture was a little different. And then there were the ones who just muttered, and shuffled away. The neighborhood gossip economy had just taken a major hit. Later that afternoon, I got a call from my contact at the sheriff's office. "She's out," he said simply. Apparently, she'd been released after processing, but not without consequences. She now had a pending court date for both charges, and a permanent mark in the sheriff's system. "If she comes near your property again, we won't be having a conversation next time. We'll just be booking her." That gave me a kind of reassurance I hadn't felt since this whole mess started. It wasn't just me guarding my own boundaries anymore. Now the law itself was standing in front of them. The funny thing was, her absence actually improved the mood on the block. People who had been keeping their heads down for weeks started chatting again. One neighbor even joked, "It's like the air smells fresher now." I laughed, but I knew exactly what he meant. Of course, I knew she wasn't going to vanish entirely. The real test would be what she did next. And the next sign came sooner than I expected. The following morning, I noticed her car back in her driveway. She wasn't outside, but the curtains in her front window twitched just enough for me to know she was watching. It was almost like she was waiting to see if I'd react. I didn't. I just went about my day. That night, as I locked up, I walked into my garage and looked around. Still empty. Still clean. Still mine. It was strange. For weeks that space had been the center of a ridiculous war, but now it felt like a fortress. And the best part? I knew it was safer than ever. Because after everything that had happened, the sheriff's department decided to upgrade their own lock and access system for the lease. They installed a new keypad entry, logged every use, and even added their own motion sensor camera in the corner. Now, even if someone tried to pull another stunt, there'd be zero question about who was responsible. One deputy joked when they were installing it, "Pretty sure no one's going to risk it now. But hey, if they do, we'll have front row seats." We both laughed, but deep down I knew he was right. That evening, as the sun went down, I stood on my porch for a while. The street looked almost peaceful again. No unwanted trucks in my garage. No shouting matches. No surprise letters demanding thousands of dollars. Just the quiet hum of normal life starting to return. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the last chapter. People like her don't just fade away. They watch. They wait. And when they think the world's forgotten, they try one last time to prove they can win. But if that time ever came, I knew one thing for certain: she'd be walking straight into a fight she couldn't possibly win.